access the podcast of OA. Located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will, the podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lantern Myron Rumsey, the podcast of OA begins now.
Welcome, friends, back to another episode of the podcast of OA. This is episode number 159, and I am your co-host, Myron Rumsey, joined by our good friend, Phil Bova. We are in a brave new world. Phil, how is life going in St. Louis, Missouri?
St. Louis is getting by. Everything's closed. Parks are closed. I mean, you can still walk around, but playgrounds and stuff like that are all barred off. And our district's still closed. They don't expect us to go back till the 22nd, but with this national advisory put out that till the 30th, that's probably going to change as we get closer to that date. But just homebound, doing some stuff, doing some working from home like everybody else is, I'm sure, and getting by raising little Clark. That's about it.
As you know, I'm in New York, so I'm in kind of the coronavirus capital of the United States right now. And fortunately, I live far away from where all the impact is, and I certainly feel for everybody who's going through this crisis right now and has someone that they love and know that is going through this awful disease that's going around. But I have to be honest, I'm very grateful to be living in the central part of the state. I think we've got in my county about 20 cases, and that's about it, which is 20 too many. But
it is. We actually had two cases in our district. But luckily it wasn't at our school, the one that I work at. It was at other schools. So, but I think it's been self-contained with just those two individuals. So it's a good thing. My wife and I are both working out of the home, like yourself. And it's been an interesting challenge doing everything without being in person. I oversee about 40 people and a number of different services for school districts. And so we're trying to do our very best to provide districts with what they need. And it's been quite the challenge. I'm finding myself more exhausted now than I do on a regular day work. You know what I found not fun about this? There's no fun to it by any means, but there's been a lot of people, everybody's using social media and stuff like that as their platforms to get in touch, working from home or whatnot. So a lot of broadcasters are doing remote things from their houses and everything like that. And it's funny because a lot of them are kind of apologizing because the kids make noise in the background, or the dog's barking in the background, or, pots and pans are dropping in the background or whatnot. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, it kind of shows a different side of humanity, knowing that they're in their own personal environment, yet they're still willing to do the work. And even if you do hear those type of things, it brings them closer to the individuals that are going through this all together. If there's any kind of bright point to that. My wife and I had an amusing experience last week. It hit mid 60s last week for one day, and everybody decided to walk their dog at the same time and go out and enjoy the sun at about the same time. And my wife and I are walking around, and we live in a very suburban-y neighborhood, and we're walking around, and it's about a mile to go from our house up and around the bend and back again. And as you're walking down the sidewalk, you see people coming from the opposite direction. And I coined it pandemic chicken as to who was going to cross the street to get out of the way of the person first. It just was very surreal, but I'm glad to be having some time to talk to you and not think about this quite so much, because it's dominating everything that's out there. But, there's some really good things going on in the world right now, too. And one of the things I want to do is shout out the Raging Bullets podcast. Now, Raging Bullets podcast, I've talked about it a lot on this show. It was my first podcasting experience. I really love listening to Sean Whalen and Jim Seguin talk about DC Comics. And this past month, they celebrated their 14th year, which is quite an amazing milestone. Yeah, good for them, man. Good for them. Hats off. That's a milestone.
And their episodes are like marathons. They go in depth on a lot of different books, and some of their episodes are 3 hours long. It's amazing to see the amount of volume of content that those two gentlemen have put out over the past 14 years. So my hat's off to them. I have not talked to either one of them in a couple of years, but if they are listening to our show at all, hats off to you, gentlemen. I applaud you. I know how much work it takes to do a podcast, and to do it for as long as you guys have and as consistently as you guys have is quite an achievement. So kudos to you.
Yeah. Hats off. That's awesome.
The other thing that just happened was they, they're doing another Justice League animated film that's going to come out in May, and it's Justice League Dark Apocalypse War. And one of the things we just found out was, well, we already knew that we heard that Nathan Fillion is back as Hal Jordan. So that's not really news per se. It hadn't come out in the, the cast listing when they put that stuff out for the voice actors. They didn't have him listed there. They did list, I'm trying to remember the name of the other actor. Roger Cross is doing the voice of Jon Stewart, but Nathan Fillion is back as Hal Jordan. If you watch the trailer, I don't know, Phil, did you see the trailer for this yet?
Not yet, no. Mm-mm.
In the trailer, you see the central power battery on Oa explode.
Oh, interesting.
Yep.
Okay, I need to watch the trailer then.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And what we're hearing, and it's kind of conflicting because James Tucker has kind of gone on social media and kind of denied it. But what we're hearing is that this movie is the last one in the current DC animated movie universe continuity, which started way back in 2013 with Justice League, The Flashpoint Paradox.
Right, and I remember when the news first broke, and I'm not trying to rail on anybody by any means, but CBR was one of the first ones to put it out, and their tagline was "Apocalypse War reportedly ends the DC AMU," which the title itself was kind of misleading, and I kind of picked up on it because I was like, "Hold on," I automatically clicked on it because I was like, "Wait a minute, there's no way that DC animated films are going to end their run," because I know they've been really good and they've gotten good response. But of course, as you read the article further, it just basically means that it ends that current run from back to Flashpoint.
Right. And apparently James Tucker said, this is the last one I'm producing. So I don't know whether somebody's got that in their head that it's actually ending, or is it really ending? I don't know. But I think they've had a lot of success with these other stories they've been doing, like Gotham by Gaslight and the recent Red Son. I don't know if you saw that, but that was really good.
That sounds amazing.
I don't know if they're going to be doing more of those kind of one-off things, or if they're going to do things that are not in continuity, or are they going to do a brand new continuity? I don't know. And maybe with HBO Max coming and DC Universe, becoming bigger and bigger, maybe they're going to shift their focus in that direction and maybe not do movies as much as maybe more weekly or monthly animated series. Who knows?
Well, and then you also, given the fact that this whole Dan DiDio thing and what's going to be happening later on this year, you never can tell where they're pivoting into. I mean, and not to mention, in light of what we're going through right now, what kind of impact that's going to have on the industry itself, So, there's going to be a lot of changes on top of a lot of changes that are going to be happening in the next, probably the next few months, especially over summer.
I know for me, if they're going to shift their focus away from a continuity and they're going to adapt stories that are existing and maybe some new stories as well, I'm really loving the idea of seeing a Sinestro Corps War and a Blackest Night set of films. I would just, as a Green Lantern fan, I think that's what a lot of us want.
But my question about that is, do you think, with how big Blackest Night was, you think you could compact that into a 2-hour animated movie or less?
Well, they did The Death of Superman and The Reign of Superman as 2 different movies.
Yeah, I guess you could do that with Blackest Night. Actually, you could probably do that. I would do a 2-part Blackest Night. I mean, I think that would do it more justice because I fear if you're going to try to limit it to just one, you're going to eliminate a lot of excellent parts that happen throughout that whole entire series.
Right. I hope if they do something like that, and I'm not saying they are, so please don't anybody start saying that we're reporting that they are, because we don't have any inside information. But if they do that, I do hope they I hope they don't pull their punches and try to do PG or PG-13. because I think part of what makes that story sell is the horror element. And if you tone that down too much, you're not going to have the shock. The whole thing of the, Scar biting and killing a guardian and ripping the hearts out, that visceral nature, I think, is needed to underscore how horrific that event was. And how terrifying, I think you need to have that. And not that I want to see a gore fest, but I just think to be true to the story, you need to go that road.
And I'm actually surprised that they haven't done anything about that up to this point, because, a lot of people you talk to, Green Lantern or otherwise, they always refer to the Blackest Night as being one of the biggest DC events, and it always gained a lot of praise for its volume and its depth. And I'm curious of why they would wait so long to do something like that, but I don't know. Decision makers are decision makers, so you never can tell where their mindset's at. But it's just kind of curious why we haven't seen anything of an animated film at this point, or something to that nature.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping that last year, with it being the 10th anniversary, maybe we would see something, but it is what it is. Speaking of Blackest Night, one of the things that I found out was DC hasn't announced it yet, but there are some places on the internet you can go to see upcoming books and releases and so on. And one of the things that I found out there was in November, DC is going to be releasing a huge box set of Blackest Night and Brightest Day. It's a 12 hardcover edition box set that comes with the power rings, and it basically collects all of Blackest Night and all of Brightest Day. Now, there are some one-offs that are not included. I was, Chad from the Lantern Cast and I were talking on Twitter a little bit, and he was like, this is $300. For $300, you think they could get all the one-offs? And I had forgotten about some of the issues that he mentioned that were missing. But it has a fair number. I mean, it has like the Adam and the Hawk Band and Phantom Stranger and Weird Western Tales and some of those issues that tied into Blackest Night, but it doesn't have like the Justice League book that might have tied into it and those kind of issues. It's not a complete thing. And I don't know if we'll ever get a complete thing because it was such a huge, huge event, just to look at the cost of this.
I think if I remember correctly, when I first originally read it, I ended up getting all the digital copies, and I got all the main 8-issue story arc, and then I got all the supplemental issues from all the characters across the DC universe. And if I remember correctly, the number was at 76 or 77 total comic book issues that were encapsulated in the Blackest Night event. Now, somebody would have to check my numbers on that, but I thought I remembered having that file, and I remember having them individually counted, because what I had ended up doing was I read it after it had already come out, and I got all the issues and all the inclusions of it, and I went and looked for a reading order, and I numbered them 1 through 70 something, and I read them straight all the way through, and that's with all the tie-in issues, across the whole DC panel, and it made it more of an it was a lot of reading, but it made it much more rich when you start including, all your Superman titles, but even though your Batman titles, and all the other like Teen Titans and everything. And somebody will have to check the number on that, but I believe it was around 76 or 77 total issues of comics, which is that's a lot.
That's a lot of books. Yeah.
But worth it.
Speaking of books, we don't know if there's going to be a Green Lantern issue this month. It's one of the things going on with the coronavirus that Diamond has suspended releasing any books, and there's a whole lot of stuff going on about that we're going to talk a little bit about later. We're going to be interviewing a person who now, Phil, is this the owner of Apotheosis, or is this somebody who works there?
Yeah, I think it's the owner. I'd have to verify it when he calls, but yeah, I think it's the owner, and hopefully he'll be able to, from a retail perspective, I think it's going to be nice to have somebody like that on our show that can kind of offer their insight on how they're dealing with the magnitude of these changes. So I felt like it would be helpful for the listeners, let alone myself, as somebody, because I haven't got to visit their shop, and I couldn't even tell you how long I've been there, especially this goes back to before January, since my son's been born. So, and I know we've been looking forward to going to visit these guys, and, and I want Clark to meet the group, and, and see the shop because, I love going in there, and it's like a lounge. So they sell beer and they sell like sodas and snacks there, and they do like stand-up comedy stuff there. They do like game nights there and everything. So it's like a full encompassing fandom, point of interest for everybody to go to hang out. It's really, really cool.
It sounds really cool. I'm interested in talking to him and getting a retailer's perspective. And I thought it might be good for our listeners to hear about that. And we could talk a little bit about what's going on. But one of the things that did happen the last couple of days, now you and I are recording this on March 31st. The plan was for tomorrow for there to be digital comics from both Marvel and DC. And retailers were pretty upset that they were going to release digital when they couldn't sell the paper copies. And so both DC and Marvel walked back and said the digital versions are going to be delayed a few weeks. But we'll get into some more detail there. The thing I'm really excited about for this episode, we decided not to do a retro review or anything. We decided, one of the things that I've been wanting to do for a while was to take the spotlight off of us and shine it on our fellow fans. And I had an idea for this segment that we're going to call You Are the Core. And I'm going to be picking people from the fan community. We have a very rich and wonderful community on Facebook, and we have a number of people who are very engaged with us on Twitter. And I'm going to pick some of those individuals to come on the show and do short interviews of fans to find out, what's their experience and what's their background. And I thought, right now we're in the midst of this crisis, and we're going to get through this, and I know we're going to get through it. And we have to be the strength for each other. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be neat to shine the spotlight on some of our fans to show how rich this community is. So I'm really excited to do that. So we're going to be recording with an individual here very, very shortly. And, so, those of you that are listening, don't be surprised, if somewhere along the line I contact you, because I want to make this a regular segment of the show. And Phil and I were talking off mic beforehand that during this crisis, we're going to try to do an episode a week, even if it's shorter, to provide more content so that people who are locked up in their homes and can't get out or they just want to break from things, that we're providing a steady stream of content to them. So I'm excited about that, but I'm really excited about the fact that you are the core. And so we're going to do that here in just a few minutes.
All right. Awesome. I'm looking forward to that. It's kind of a nice change up from what we're used to doing and stuff. And, we can do retro reviews anytime, but I think it's nice to pull the fans in, because, they're out there, they're downloading the podcast, they're listening to us, and, it's nice to give back instead of just giving.
Right. I think it's important. And I think it particularly right now with what's going on, I want to shine the spotlight on the people who are fans just like us, because I think there's a lot to be learned from our fellow fans. And I just think it's a neat thing. So it gives us some extra content to throw in there with the retro reviews while we're waiting for new books to come out, and, give everybody a little bit of a moment in the Emerald spotlight, so to speak.
Well, we all started there. I remember calling in and talking to you guys a long time ago, and lo and behold, here I am, on the other end of it. And, it's I don't know, it's fun. And I'll always remember, when I called in. I remember calling in to the guys over at Lantern Cast too. I got on their show one time as well, and it's fun. It's fun. It's gonna be good to hear from the fans.
All right, well, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we will be doing our first segment, our first installment of We Are the Core, or You Are the Core.
Listen up, Lanterns. It's time you took the oath with Green Lantern John Stewart. In brightest day, in blackest night, don't let the podcast of Oa escape your sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power. Green Lantern's light.
And welcome back to the podcast of Oa, and we are excited for this brand new segment called You Are the Core, where we turn the Emerald spotlight on our fellow Green Lantern fans. And we are joined by our friend David Kocher from Los Angeles, California. David, how are you doing?
Oh, man, I'm doing phenomenal. I just want to say that I'm really honored and thankful that you guys extended this invite for you guys' podcast. I love listening to you guys. I caught the episode with Liam Sharp. I caught another episode with you guys talking about the early issues of Green Lantern, like the Silver Age with Hal Jordan. I thought that was pretty cool. And I love your guys' passion. I'm a member of the Blog of Oa, the Facebook group, and I've made a lot of great connections and contacts over there as well. And it's a very positive, very good environment, and it's a safe place for fans. And I recommend it to any Green Lantern fan that I that I can find.
I appreciate that. It's been a very good community. Every now and then we'll have a little bump in the road, but for the most part, everybody is extremely supportive. And one of the reasons why I asked you to be the first person on this segment was that you always go on and you post since positive and reaffirming things. And right now, that's really what we're looking for in this world. So I thank you for your participation in that community and helping to make it what it is.
Oh, you're very welcome. And just something to bring attention to. I've been a member in that group now for a good minute, and I actually think it has grown a lot. Like, I really think there's a lot of enthusiasm. I definitely see a lot of people connecting with one another from that, and I'm totally with you on the same page as well in terms of, like, pretty much it's like every member of that group, or just in general, we really got to step it up and really be, the Green Lantern's light. We really got to, be that optimism and really, really channel, that part of ourselves, because I'm a firm believer that the characters that we look up to and that we admire, it's ultimately a reflection of like pieces of who we are at our core. And I think it's a great time. I mean, we definitely got a lot of free time to do something like this. So it's a good time.
Well, not only that, David, but like Myron and I have talked about, like, podcasting. There's not as much toxicity in the podcasting universe as there is when you get on a lot of other social media sites. And, we all have our likes, and we all have our dislikes, and it's legitimately okay to have both. But what I find really harsh is when the people really, really impose bad judgment on you just because of your own views, and it could be anything from, like, I rail on Simon Baz all the time. Look, I like Simon Baz. I like that he's Green Lantern. Just because I don't like the character doesn't mean that I just don't like the people that like Simon Baz. It just means I don't like the character. But I think sometimes it gets overlooked, and in the podcasting realm, it's new, it's different for me even, and like you said, it's a reflection of fun. And the Green Lantern universe and the Green Lantern people have their own tight knit community, much like the own Batman universe does, and the Flash, and all the other characters.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that, and it's interesting because I've been following. I've been paying like more attention to the fandom in terms of like the last few years or so. But I feel like it's interesting because I've ever since I've been, I guess, with this whole coronavirus, it feels like that everybody is not arguing and bickering as much. And I feel like this is going to be a shift with the fandom. Hopefully, I mean, that's just based on from what I'm seeing. But I definitely do. I can definitely connect with what you're saying about how, let's say you don't like Simon Baz, but that's okay. You don't like what you don't like. I mean, it's not like I'm gonna, I don't understand that mind frame where it's like you say you don't like a character like Simon Baz, and then people start attacking you and they're malicious, and then they start, imposing these false, these false things about you when they don't even know you at your core. You know what I'm saying? And
right.
I mean that exists, but at the end of the day, I think it's really just about managing it, your attention, and really, that exists. People are gonna say conniving remarks, depending on, you just gotta like pick and choose your battles with that. Because I've had people that have criticized me and said some things to me where I'm like, what? You don't even know me, and it's like, I have to make that conscious decision in that moment. Do I want to give that energy and argue and bicker and then potentially lower myself to them, or do I just move on and just give attention to what's going to be more productive and make me feel good?
Absolutely.
Willpower. At the end of the day, willpower.
So, David, how long have you been a Green Lantern fan?
I've been a Green Lantern fan more so definitely the last 4 years. When I how do I say this? Because there's a lot there's a lot that's happening that I don't want to give away too much, but Green Lantern, I've read more of John Broom's stuff. I'm very familiar with that. I have the Green Lantern Omnibus with John. Yeah, the Green Lantern Omnibus Volume 1, and I have Volume 2. And then I just skipped a lot of stuff and I went to Jeff Johns stuff. But I've read every single story of Jeff Johns' run, and it's super epic. I love that. And when I started reading Jeff Johns' run, it really came at a really critical time in my life, because I guess you could say I had this spiritual reading, and this reading was pretty much saying that I was somebody that was living in my head, and I was suffering because I was analysis paralysis, and I really took that to heart. And so right around the time when I really started reading Jeff Johns' stuff was when I started doing a lot of Meissner acting classes, which really stresses a lot on emotions. And so it was all in sync with the emotional spectrum, and it was just amazing. I mean, they're just you could tell that there was a lot of research that I could tell that Jeff Johns did when he wrote that, because there's a lot of esotericism in that, and even with Grant Morrison stuff too. I will say, I as of right now, I have every single issue of Grant Morrison's run with the variant cover. And sometimes I will admit, I do get a little bit lost, but the artwork of Liam Sharp is it's just super phenomenal. It's literally some of the best work that I've ever seen. You just get lost in it, and you just, man, it's just amazing, just how much in awe you get just by just looking at it, just getting drawn in, and you really just it's funny because every time I read the Green Lantern with this current series, I literally take my time with every page, because each page is so good with the art and the coloring. And sometimes maybe I might have something go over my head with the story and I'll have to reread it, but man, it's amazing.
We've had that discussion many a times, Myron, just about how much we've had to reread a couple issues. I know I've went back and reread a couple of them 2-3 times even, just to kind of focus on more things, because Liam Sharp just takes your focus off of things and makes you just look at the art.
Oh yeah, it's phenomenal. And I mean, what I'm kind of hoping for is I really loved the bit of the Star Sapphire. I thought that was really good. I would like to see a little bit more in season 2. And I mean, if I had a wish list, I would love, for Jeff Johns to come back and really kind of maybe continue a little bit more off of how he finished it. Because it's interesting, because if you're coming in with just the awareness of what Star Sapphire is, and you read Jeff Johns' Green Lantern run, it's great, because you really don't expect that direction. They really grounded Carol Ferris's character, and they brought her almost as if she was able to control her power, she just wasn't possessed all the time. And I thought that was pretty cool, so there's a lot of things that I thought that Jeff Johns did right, in terms of the yellow impurity, and making Star Sapphire leveled where she can actually be conscious and control her power and not be possessed all the time. And man, seriously, Star Sapphire, especially with Doug Mahnke and Ethan Van I think Ethan Van Sciver, I don't know if he got to, yeah, he did get to Drew, I think, but she's one of the sexiest characters. And here's the thing. If we want to talk like Marvel and DC, I respect what the Marvel movies have done, and they're great, but with the DC,
like where the DC film universe is right now. Like as of right now, I do think it is in a little bit of limbo. Like right now, they're kind of doing like 4 or 5 different things right now. But what I would love to see happen, what I'm like really like pushing for, and what I'm really advocating for, is I can respect and acknowledge what's happening with Wonder Woman 1984 and Jason Momoa Aquaman. Like I get that that's a product of, you know, millions of dollars that are invested, and that's the situation that we're in. But to think like long term ahead, I would love to move past that and just really just start over again. You know, God bless Henry Cavill. I think he did the best that he could with what he got. It's unfortunate what happened, but it is what it is. But, you know, at this point, you got to move on. You know, you gotta look at the bigger picture of things. And so I would love to see, you know, a new Superman, new Aquaman, Cyborg. And you know, if you really think about it, I mean, I think if there's any like real blessing with what's happened with Green Lantern, is that, you know, Green Lantern really missed the Justice League wave. You know, like apparently there was like a lot of things that happened behind the scenes where I guess like Green Lantern was gonna be in that movie with a different actor. And, you know, I mean, if you really think about it, just imagine that if Justice League came out and Hal Jordan was in it, that would have been another bullet to, you know, the Green Lantern franchise. It would have been harder. But I think going forward, I think right now there's too many pros for Green Lantern, but because people don't think big, or they don't have a visioning process, they don't see the potential. I mean, obviously you guys know what the potential is, because I mean, we're all fans here, you know, but the potential for Green Lantern to really be something big is great. And the way that I look at it is, because of that movie and 10 years later, the stakes are so much higher now that they can't fail. Like I know that, you know, especially for Jeff Johns and him, you know, I've been listening to some interviews and that type of stuff, but it's super personal for him, you know, to really get that off the ground, and he's producing it. And I mean, who knows what the details are with, you know, the HBO Max series and the movie. I mean, for all we know right now, there's going to be a movie and an HBO series. And knowing that Berlanti is producing the series and him and Jeff Johns are really tied, I mean, personally, it wouldn't surprise me if we saw like a movie that crossovered with the series and so forth.
Well, Berlanti's done a wonderful job. I mean, the guy's great when he works on the series and the shows. So, I mean, him and Jeff Johns working together that'd be a gold mine of talent, you know, especially when it comes to Green Lantern, like you said.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential there, but what I would love for DC to do going forward is, I mean, I respect Marvel for what they've done. I mean, obviously they're super successful. I mean, they've made over $20 billion, but I really think that DC as a whole has a great opportunity to try to phase out what they can with what Snyder did, but at the same time really reintroduce and create something new that really looks original and just very, like, I don't know if I'm using the right word, but substantial, like really just because I mean, in my opinion, man, as much as I respect what Marvel has done, I mean, all of the superheroes, like their costumes, they all look like they're made by like the same tailor. Like they don't have like a good sense of authenticity and like individuality. Like it all looks like one like Marvel movie, as opposed to like when Iron Man came out, like that first movie that came out, that was an Iron Man movie. Like that was like its own thing. And then you had the Incredible Hulk, and then you had Captain America. But I think somewhere after, I think like Age of Ultron, that's when things really started, in my opinion, to got like bland. And of course, yeah, they're making a lot of money, but there's just so much potential for DC just to really just, okay, you know what, we're just going to do our own thing. We're going to make our own movies, and we're going to just focus on us, and we're not going to pay attention to anything else besides what we're doing, you know?
And I think you bring up a good point, because I think one of DC's problems is that it was a competition value. You know, Marvel was doing this, Marvel was doing that, but then DC had to come back and attempt to try to do something just as grand. And, you know, yeah, that sometimes works, but oftentimes when it comes to the comic book universe, you know, we've seen it a lot. It doesn't always work that way because you're always going to have that Coke Pepsi mentality to where one is always or sometimes just going to be better than the other. But you have to scale yourself back and not so much see it as a competition, but so much as seeing it as a nuanced approach to what you can do in the development of a film or a character. You know, much like Joker did, or you know, much like Aquaman did. You know, and much like Wonder Woman has done. And I think you're right. I mean, I think it was good for DC to step back, and no discredit to Henry Cavill because he really took Superman to new levels. I think a lot of that wasn't his fault. A lot of it was how they handled his character and handled the films. But I think at this point, you're right. I mean, unfortunately, they're going to have to see past him and move on in a different direction with a new actor.
Yeah, I mean, and that's going to take about that. I mean, who knows? I mean, we'll see what happens. I mean, I think that they're kind of. I think he kind of alluded to something with Black Adam. You know, I think he kind of alluded something with that, but to me, I'm already like thinking past that. I mean, one of my dreams is I just somehow, some way, just get the right people together and then just make a full out, just make a Justice League movie. I mean, that's probably like realistically 10 years away, but I mean, I want to see a Justice League movie like done the right way. You know, where you have, you know, Superman, you have Wonder Woman, and, you know, you have Hal Jordan. You know, that's my guy. Hal Jordan that's my boy. You know, I'm always gonna I'm always gonna be down for Hal Jordan. That guy's the man.
So I got a question for you, real quick. Do you read your comics digitally, or do you get the hard copies from your local comic book shop?
Yeah, so I get the actual the copy itself, just because I mean, for me, it helps with decorative purposes. Like I like to actually see the physical copy. I like to read them. I do read the graphic novels as well, but something that Liam Sharp like brought to my attention. But like, yeah, there's even a difference with like print. You know, there's the glossy kind, and then there's like the actual like paper, like from like the 90s, you know. And like right now, I'm currently reading Batman: The Long Halloween. And,
that's a good one.
Yeah, it's a great one. About halfway through it, but the paper is really glossy. But I have like other graphic novels that are just like actual like just paper, and I mean it's old and it's great, and there's just something, there's just a frequency in that paper with the artwork that just makes it just like mystical. Like it's just magic, you know. It's just wonderful.
So, David, what does Green Lantern mean to you?
Green Lantern means to me, for me, it's the willpower. It's really looking at anything that's happening in your life right now and channeling all of the willpower to overcome that obstacle. I think that's what it means to me, with Green Lantern. Just the ability to overcome fear. And I like the idea of overcoming fear versus like being born with it. Like I think in John Broom's run, I think if you were a Green Lantern, you were born without fear. But I think like later it was more like you had to overcome it. And I think a lot of us have, you know, fears and we're born with it. But, you know, I love willpower because there's a sense of using your awareness and moving that in a conscious direction forward and overcoming that and not letting like anything just get in your way. And I think I was like listening to this one interview with Jeff Johns, and he talked about how Jordan is just that type of character where he just jumps off the plane and he figures out you know how to work the parachute. You know, he just kind of just jumps first. And what I love about Hal Jordan is that I mean, he's not really somebody that just thinks things through. He just takes action. Like, I mean, if he hits a brick wall, he hits a brick wall, but he's not like indecisive at all. He's just like, I'm going to do it now.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
What would you like to see collected in a trade that's not currently in publication?
As far as like Green Lantern goes?
Yeah.
That's a good question. So for me, I mean, this is like an idea that I have. I mean, I would definitely need to talk to a collaborator, and who knows, maybe somebody, listens to this and they run with it, and it's okay, because it's not my business. But what I would love to do is I think there's more stories to tell with Hal Jordan. And I think as great and as epic and as grand as the emotional spectrum is, I think you can go more with it. Like, I think you can do like a mental spectrum. Like, what if there's a mental spectrum, and there's that, or there's like there's like this, like the spiritual spectrum, and because sometimes, yeah, there's the Red Lantern Corps, and they're all about rage. But what if you were to have like a righteous anger? Like, what's the polarity of rage? What's the polarity of hope? Being too hopeful and not having, no action, or polarity of fear, where some people feel like there's, maybe there's like good and fear. So, for me, like, I mean, there's different, like, I'm pulling from like esotericism and like hermeticism and all that type of stuff. And I know like Grant Morrison's really big on that. But I think you can go in that direction with Green Lantern. Like, I think there's more to tell, and I'm just so happy. Like, okay, so I haven't finished Robert Venditti's run. Like, I did read, like, I think I read like one book, like, but what killed me was Kyle Rayner getting with Carol Ferris. Like, that hurt, like I was like, what, really? But I get it. You got to do something different. Like, I get it. But I'm just happy that Jeff Johns finalized his run where Hal and Carol got married, and they have their child Martin. And for me, the fact that exists and that's part of the canon, I can rest on that, and I can move past whatever happened after that.
Yeah, it wasn't exactly a good chapter, that section, I tell you. So a lot of fans have collections, either of comics, toys, collectibles, all kinds of stuff. Do you have something favorite Green Lantern related that holds special meaning for you, or that's just a favorite thing?
Yeah, I actually, let's see. Look at I'm in my room right now. Let's see. For me, I would say I do have an actual Green Lantern ring, which that actually does mean something to me. I have a Green Lantern ring. I wear it on occasions, and it's just amazing because, like, when you put on a ring like that and you know what it represents, and it just does something to you. So I do catch myself at times where if ever I feel a little bit down, I put the ring on, and then I say the oath, and then I just use my imagination. But yeah, I have a Green Lantern ring, and that's probably like my most prized possession that I have. Yeah, I have quite a bit of stuff. I have every single Jeff Johns book. I have every single. Let's see. I have from Jeff Johns' run all the way to Robert Venditti's run. Well, I haven't finished Robert Venditti's run. I'm eventually gonna finish it. But yeah, it's pretty much what I have. I still got to read. What is it? Emerald Twilight, and Emerald Dawn. Like, what I want to do eventually is I want to read those, and then I want to reread Jeff Johns' run, because then I'll probably pick up more stuff from it, because that stuff exists. So yeah.
Yeah, I think if you read Emerald Twilight and now knowing what you know, it'll make more sense.
Yeah, because when I even till this day, like, if I ever, if and when I ever do, have that conversation with Jeff, one of the things I would love to talk with him about is be like, hey, can you break down? Well, maybe you guys can, actually, because you guys and you guys are more advanced in this stuff than I am, but I never really understood the whole Spectre and Parallax. Like, I mean, I know what happened with Parallax. Like, I know that he, wiped out Coast City, but like, I guess there's like a trinity going on there in terms of that. Like, I guess Hal Jordan, when you see Hal Jordan in Rebirth, you're not really seeing Hal Jordan, you're seeing something else. So I'm I still have to figure that shit out, but maybe you guys know.
So when Hal was killed off in Final Night, several years later, Jeff got hired to write a story called Day of Judgment. And Day of Judgment was a story about the Spectre who didn't have a host getting a new host. And so Jeff wanted to make that story a backdoor return for Hal Jordan. And originally he pitched it so that, I'm trying to remember who it was. There was somebody else who was going to become the Spectre, was his original idea, and that Hal was going to just come back to human form without a ring, and that was going to be step one of getting Hal back to becoming Green Lantern again. And then DC editorial was like, well, let's, we're not really ready for that, but what about making Hal the Spectre? So that's what they did. So you had a run of the Spectre, I think it was written by J.M. DeMatteis, that ran for a while, that had Hal as the Spectre, and Hal was trying to turn the Spectre from the wrath of God, from the spirit of vengeance to the spirit of redemption. And so it was an interesting run. It dealt a lot with Hal's family, and it was very heady, but it was kind of interesting. And then after that ended, that's when they decided to do Rebirth, and there's a whole bunch of stories about what happened there. But when he did Rebirth, he basically tried to say, well, this Parallax being is what changed Hal, and the Spectre basically bonded with Hal, chose to bond with Hal because he was trying to redeem him and get him free of Parallax.
I really do appreciate that. I'm gonna have to, there's so much, there's so many layers to the Hal Jordan mythology. And I feel like, I know some of the criticisms, and I know that even Liam Sharp has said this too, because I follow him religiously on Twitter, and I did meet Liam Sharp, by the way, who is super nice guy. Like, seriously one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. I can actually share this with you, but when John Schnepp passed away, he had a memorial at the Titmouse studio, and I happened to go there, and I saw Liam Sharp there, and I walked up, and I'm like, "Hey, are you Liam Sharp?" He's like, he's got like his accent. He's like, "Yeah, I'm Liam Sharp. Oh, yeah, it's nice to meet you." Really, really nice guy. And I did not know this, but at the time, but he revealed to me that he met John Schnepp because he worked on what was it? The Death and Life of Superman Lives, the documentary, and Liam Sharp was actually I believe he was a concept artist for Superman Lives, and so that's how he got connected with John Schnepp on that. And so when John Schnepp passed away from Collider, he showed up over there, and at that time, Liam Sharp was working on issue 4 of the Green Lantern, and he was showing me all that stuff before it even got sent over. He's like, "Let me show you this real quick," and I was just in total awe. And he was super kind, super cool guy, and that's a cherished memory that I have of meeting him. I just still got to meet Grant Morrison, but yeah, that was a good time.
Very cool. All right. Well, David, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you giving us some of your time, and thank you for being our first guest on You Are the Core.
Oh, you're welcome, guys. Thank you guys so much again. I hope you guys have a blessed night. Stay safe out there, and we'll make through this in brightest day and through the blackest night for sure.
All right. Super.
This is Salak, Green Lantern of Sector 1418, and you are receiving the podcast of Oa.
The podcast of Oa.
And welcome back to the podcast of Oa. And we are joined by Martin Casas from one of Phil's comic shops in the St. Louis area, Apotheosis Comics. Martin, welcome aboard.
Thanks for having me.
So
glad to be here.
I'm sure there's a lot going on in your world right now with what's going on with the comic book industry. And you know, I want to frame this in that obviously in the grand scheme of things, I know for you as a businessman, it has a lot to do with your business. And for us as fans, it's certainly a major part of our lives in terms of probably our favorite hobby. But in the grand scheme of things, you know, people are dying out there. And I want to make sure people don't think we're focusing on the misery of the comic book industry in the grand scheme of things, knowing what's going on in the world around us. But you know, Diamond has suspended their shipment of books. And one of the things I saw today was that they're not paying the vendors, which means they're not paying, you know, Valiant and Image and DC and Marvel and so on. For you guys, in the comic book shop industry, are you guys getting, I mean, are you being held to the orders that you guys placed already, or how does that working from your perspective?
You know, the worst thing about this whole deal is how unclear the communication has been. Last week, we got some kind of notification from Diamond saying that they weren't going to be sending shipments, but they would be sending reorders. And then any books that we had ordered, they would ship. But then within like a day or two, it changed to, we're going to go digital. And then, okay, now we're not shipping. And now, you know, we are shipping, but we're not going to ship all the stuff. And then it just kind of started this cascade of all the other publishers with Marvel and DC also kind of not really knowing what they were doing either. And so the last week has been an incredibly confusing time for retailers, myself included, you know, because there's just been no clear lines of communication, no clear plan. No one really knows what the other person's doing. And they're just kind of throwing information out there to see what sticks for retailers is kind of how I felt. But yeah, so, you know, what we've been told that they're going to hold on to our books and then we're going to get them after this whole thing passes. Now, I don't know. Does that mean we're going to get hit with one huge bill at a time? Probably. Does that mean that we're going to get all the subscriber books that have been held are going to come to us? Maybe. You know, there's just a lot of stuff in the air that we don't know about. And every day it changes. Today, the newest information was that Marvel's not going digital and neither is DC, but then there's some people that are doing digital, so we don't know. But we just don't know.
And see, and that's not a good thing for a retailer perspective, because then, I mean, communication has always been key. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and we live in a communicative world, and granted, in light of things that are going on, it's kind of it's an up in the air kind of mentality with everything, because everything's so scared on what movement to make. But I fear I would, when I first heard that Marvel wasn't putting their stuff out and DC was still putting it out digitally, then I feared, right, well, that's not cool, because you're still hurting the comic book industry. You're still hurting the comic book shops that are local.
Yeah, we even heard something where Comixology was going to, you could buy books from them, but then they would give like a proceed of their money to the local comic shop if you selected who it was. But then that fizzled or didn't go anywhere. What really is surprising to me is that nobody at Diamond picked up the phone and called Marvel and DC and Image and IDW and Aftershock and all the big players and said, look, what can we do? Instead it was, Diamond was, how can I look out for my own action? And then I'm going to go from there. And right, then everybody else kind of follow from after. But I will say that this does give us some opportunities to get creative as shop owners and as business people. In the St. Louis area, we've set up distributor supply chains with other shops, bookstores, used bookstores, you know, other shops around the country to get product to customers that who want it. I mean, right now is a time where people want something that is going to, you know, alleviate them or distract them or just give them some hope, and comics are the best medium for that. And if we can help them, you know, find the books they want, there's a great business opportunity in it for us to make sure we can do that. And, yeah, on top of that, the other thing is that we kind of feel like the clock's running out, because we don't know how long this thing's going to last. We don't know how long people are going to have money. We don't know how bad unemployment's going to get. We don't know if there's going to be a bailout. We don't know what's going to happen. So we're trying to all make as much money as possible before the well dries up, just to kind of safeguard our own necks. And it's been kind of scary the last couple of weeks trying to figure all the. this stuff out and try to plan for the unknown, and we just don't know what to,
they were talking about doing this digital release, tomorrow on April 1st, and they kind of backed off of that. They walked it back. Is there concern about the digital sales taking away from floppy sales? I mean, it used to be, at least a couple of years ago, they said that digital sales were 1/5 of what they sell in terms of paper product, physical product. But is there concern that if the paper product isn't there, that the digital stuff will start to take over? I mean, is there any of that kind of buzz going on amongst the retailers?
As far as I'm concerned, the digital and paper wars were already fought, and paper won. People are still going to come back. They're going to want their comics. They're going to want to collect it. There's a feeling you get when you're holding something that's different than when you're looking at it digitally. Like, it's not the ownership of it. It's not there. And also, I think that comic books, the tradition of it, has always been that you get those great covers, you flip through them, and you can interact with the pages. It's just like any novel. Digital comics and digital books had this fight a couple of years ago, and maybe books didn't win out, but there certainly was a détente where they both agreed to live together. So I'm not really afraid of that as much as other creators are. And quite honestly, we have so much product already to sell at the shop. Prior to COVID-19 hitting, the biggest problem we had was that we were overstocked with product and it was weighing us down. That's kind of like the biggest thing that's been going on in the comic book industry for decades. So much product, we didn't know what to move, or we couldn't move it. Now there's no new product coming in. There's a great opportunity for us to get in readers involved in old product. And so that's what we're going to do. I'm looking forward to the challenge.
And not only that, the old product is gold mine. A lot of listeners.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of listeners out there. The new stuff's cool. Don't get me wrong, but like old product is a gold mine. And to hedge on what you said about the tangible value of having a comic book, trades always look good on your shelf when they're in a big collection, and digital won't supply that for you.
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, I was just going through my long boxes in the basement and just going through and finding and digging them out and like, oh, dude, I remember when I got this. Or, you always remember when you got a book, or, back when my comics were stolen a couple months ago, Phil, I think I told you the story, but, it wasn't so much that they were stolen. It was the moments that I captured with those comics that were more valuable to me. And that I think is you can never take that away from the comic book industry.
Yeah, man, they rob the memories. That takes it personal.
Well, yeah, exactly. The other thing too is that we're starting a program this week. We have to wait till our website gets kind of up to snuff, but it's called New to You Comic Book Day. So it's New Comic Book Day, but our new program is going to be called New to You Comic Book Day, which is books we have in stock that you may be interested in that you didn't read because you only collected a certain amount of books. You only collected certain titles. You didn't have enough money to buy all the books you wanted. Well, you know what? Comic shops, we got those old books. If you like Nightwing, let's try Robin. Let's try Red Hood. We'll do them at 40% off the cover price because they're $0 now sitting in the bins. So we're just looking at creative ways of how we can market books and also opening the floodgates to new customers. A lot of parents, a lot of people are stuck inside their house. We're now doing deliveries, bringing it to people's doors. You can order online, give you a 10-pack of comics, tell us what you want. We'll throw them in the bag, drive them to your house, and you got something to look forward to.
See, and digital comics can't supply that kind of person-to-person contact, man. You're so right about that. Mm.
So are you shipping them as well?
We are, yeah. Yeah. It's funny, though. We're having some challenges with it, too, because, some of the better comic shops, better than mine certainly, were good at doing shipping already. I thought it was a huge pain in the butt, so we didn't really get into it because I wanted people to come into our store. One of the advantages Apotheosis Comics has over other shops is that we're a bar as well. So we do a lot of events. We have a lot of gatherings. We do D&D stuff. So I always wanted to bring people to the door and didn't want to ship it out, have people have product going out. I wanted them to come in so they could have an experience. And prior to us this all happening, April 1st, we were going to start a renovation on the second floor to turn it into a game room. And now we're just taking all that money and using it on an e-commerce platform and shipping. So the biggest transition for us was trying to figure out how to become a shipping and e-commerce store. And, having a store that you had a stage in it and a bar and having to turn into a warehouse was like a complete, 180 turn that we did not expect how to do. So hopefully we'll get better at this.
So as far as like the community goes, I know I've talked to you a couple times and you've been out delivering and stuff like that. How are people like responding to it?
Oh, they love it. We can deliver beers and comics to your front door. And so it's like gold,
It is.
And the other thing that's crazy too is like because of Missouri law, there were so many bars and restaurants, like they deemed bars as essential services. So bars get to stay open. And they changed the law overnight. If you had a liquor license, you automatically it now became a package liquor license, which meant that if it was in a container, you could sell it out the door and do curbside pickups and all that. And you could do deliveries. So within like 24 hours, I was like, you want your comics? You want your beer? I'm your guy. Let's make it happen. And so we've been doing we do probably maybe 10 to 20 deliveries a day now of beer. Yeah. I'll tell you one of the craziest things that happened was that, so 2 weeks before this all happened, because we're ramping up our bar business, we got a keg put in. So we just one keg of Busch beer, and we sold it like hotcakes, man. It was just crazy. And so then when the whole thing, when everything went down, we had this keg, and then we couldn't sell the beer because you can't do open container liquor because of everything that's going on. So I was like, hey, come and fill up your your jugs, or what are those things called?
Sippy cups.
Yeah. Fill up whatever you got, free beer, and come into the shop. And then people would come by and they'd come by the shop, and we'd sell only 5 people in the shop at a time. But we'd let them fill up a jug of beer and they'd head out the door. And it was great. And then buy comics, support us, tip us $20. And so it worked out pretty well. But it's been wild. And honestly, I don't see how we're going to go back to not delivering beers after this whole thing is over, but we'll see what they allow us to do.
I was going to say there was an X-Men team called Six Pack. So there
also was a DC team too.
Right. So you've got some marketability right there. Get a 6-pack and a 6-pack.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Do they make any 6-pack comics though? I guess yeah.
I don't know.
What I should do is get some Sixers and those 6-pack cartons and put the 6-pack on the outside.
There you go.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's one thing about St. Louis that I've learned living here most of my life is the fact that, once you spoil a St. Louis native, they're spoiled for life. They won't, they don't change back to that way once before. And this whole pandemic that's happening, it's going to change the face. It's going to change the face of everything. But St. Louis is notorious for the fact that once it goes one way, it's hard to go back the way it was before.
Well, and especially the leeway they give on liquor too, which is pretty incredible. They'll damn near let us do anything if it involves beer. So yeah, it's kind of funny, but
I didn't know that about the liquor law, man. That's really, really interesting. Didn't think about that.
Oh yeah. Well, and that kind of puts us at a competitive advantage over other competitors, is that we get to stay open and others don't. But we're doing the best we can with that by, like I said, we set up a supply chain to call in other comic book stores and bookstores and used bookstores, game shops, and tried to get their product to buy from them so we can give it to our customers, because they can't do deliveries, we can. And while we certainly appreciate a competitive edge, we also don't want our other comic shops to go under. So we're trying to do everything we can to help them out.
Well, one thing I noticed is that you guys were also delivering to those free book free book.
Oh, yeah.
That are in the area. Yeah.
Yeah. So what we did is we took so we started a little library program where we would take a bunch of kids books or comics or older books. DC does these really great dollar comics. Marvel does these True Believer things where they get them for $1, and we use those for marketing. So we put 10 of those into a bag and take it out to little libraries, and we put free comics in the little library, and then we'll put a little flyer in there. And, hey, scan this, and it's got a QR code, and if you want more books, email us and let us know what you're looking for, and we'll bring them out to you. So we started, and I think we filled about 40 little libraries all over the area, and we're going out and doing it again. The great thing about the little library program we're doing is that it also lets our customers get active and work off some nervous energy, and they feel like they're doing something worthwhile and helping out the community. I mean, they are, but it's also just we've been able to really provide for them a little opportunity to do something good with all this craziness that's happening.
Well, it sounds, Martin, like you guys have put a lot of energy and a lot of thinking into how do you turn the situation from a negative into a positive, or as much of a positive as you can make out of it.
Dude, I mean, I would love to say yes, but it's mostly just been like we're reacting. It's, this is a 12 round boxing match. I'll say a 20 round boxing match. And every new information that comes out, we just take another hit, and we got to just kind of figure out how to, stay on our feet. And so it's been a lot of adapting the last couple weeks. So much so that my wife and I actually didn't even have a time to sit down and talk about, okay, how are we what do we have to do for our own family, or what do we have to do to stay healthy for our family? And it was really kind of just running pretty quickly the last 2 weeks, and it was nuts. But luckily, I've been fortunate that I come from a political background, and so when you do campaign work, if you give someone, you have 48 hours to put on a 2,000 person rally because some guy's coming to town, and you got no budget to do it, you kind of throw things together. So my entire career has been built around trying to throw things together with no budget. So for me, this is all kind of like second nature, and we'll find out as soon as we find out the next bit of information. Okay, we're going to bob and weave, and we're going to come back with another plan. And kind of how it goes.
I think we figured out Martin's superpower, man. He's the business innovator. Rock on.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
No, that's impressive, Martin. That's just really impressive the way you guys have taken your shop to the community, even though the community is supposed to come to the shop,
Well, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. It's kind of, I think, for so long, comic shops have always been these places where it's, the comic book store guy from The Simpsons, or not really welcoming or warm. And so when I started Apotheosis Comics, my plan was always been to make it warm and welcoming and make sure everyone knew that they, when they come here, they're welcome. So we put our gay section in the front of the store. We put our kids section, kind of right next to it with crayons and coloring books. We'll make sure our employees are diverse. We do everything we can to make it feel warm and welcoming. And
I know every time I've come in there, you guys are fantastic as it is, but like every time I've come in there, it just feels like going to my couch, sitting there reading a book. I'll just be sitting there at the bar and just flipping through whatever I'm flipping through. And, you guys are doing your own thing. I'm sipping my coffee or my whatever I'm drinking and stuff. And, and I've always told my friends, you need to go with me to Apotheosis, man. Place is amazing.
Oh, thanks. That's a huge honor. Thank you so much. Yeah, what I'm excited about is what we're going to be when we come out of this thing. We're going to have a stronger website. We'll have a delivery service. We'll have, a better sense of who our customers are because we've been to their homes. I haven't gone inside, or don't knock on the doors or talk to them. I just go to the street and wait for them to open the door. But I'm kind of excited to see where this all turns, what this all turns into, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So where can people find you on the internet?
Go to Apotheosis Comics STL.com. And then that's where you can order. That's where you can kind of go to see our shop and all that. and buy beers and comics and everything. And then mostly look us up on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. That's kind of where we're the most active, but we're on every social media platform possible.
Now, just spitballing here, and I'm not sure if you do this. Do you guys ship internationally?
Sure, yeah.
We have a lot of viewers that are overseas, and a lot of times our viewers are so far off the mark that they don't receive their product until a lot later,
Is that right?
Yeah, I think me and Myron have talked about it a couple times where sometimes, they'll be on like a certain run that's taken place a year ago or sometimes even longer, if I'm not mistaken, right, Myron?
Yeah, a lot of the foreign language books ship a lot later, so they're not current with what we're reading. They're behind us by a bit.
Did you guys ever hear about that? I know this is the Green Lantern show, but going to another universe all together. But the Mexican Spider-Man. Did you ever hear about that story?
No.
So there's a run of Spider-Man comics in the early 70s that when Gwen Stacy was killed in Amazing Spider-Man, I believe 121, they somehow the lines got crossed between whoever was writing the comic in Mexico versus America. But Gwen Stacy doesn't die in the Mexican comic. She lives, and Peter and her get married.
Really?
And they go for like years of Peter and Gwen being married, in that universe, in the kind of that same like John Romita art style of 70s Spider-Man. And there's only a few copies out there. But if any of your listeners are listening or have a copy, I would love to read that, and I will buy it from you because I would love to know what the Mexican Spider-Man's up to.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not
Isn't
know
that
that.
wild?
That's fascinating. That is wild. Huh.
Yeah, I guess some guy. The story I read, I think on CBR, was that a collector or a fan was just in Mexico vacationing and picked up a Spider-Man comic and was like, "What? No, she's dead. She's not alive. She's dead. What's going on here?" But it's just the whole alternate reality. Isn't that cool?
Wow, that is cool.
I love the comic book community.
That's
Oh
great.
man, they're the best. Yeah, I'm actually I don't know if Phil told you the story, but how my comics were stolen a couple months ago, and we got them back. But I've been going through my collection and trying to reorganize them because the guys went through them all, and it's kind of great going through and seeing some of the old weird books I've gotten here.
That's cool.
The best, yeah.
That's awesome, Mark.
All right, Martin. Well, thank you so much for giving us some of your time and sharing things from a retailer's perspective. The best of luck to you in your shop. It looks like you've got some great plans in mind to traverse this tragedy we've got going on around the world and come out the other side in maybe even a better spot than you would think.
Well, so I hope I can offer a little bit of hope, and everyone stay safe out there, and see you in the comic book world, all right?
And Martin, pretty soon, Clark will be coming up to visit, man, once this all passes.
I got a gift for him.
All right, buddy.
See you guys soon.
Thanks, man.
Bye.
This is Giancarlo Volpe, producer of Green Lantern, the animated series, and you're listening to the podcast of OA.
All right, welcome back. So Phil and I off mic decided that we were going to skip the listener feedback for this episode because this episode ran a little longer than I thought it might, which is a good thing because I think the conversation was really, really good. But I think we'll hold the listener feedback until next week's episode.
Yeah, sounds good. I like that idea.
Absolutely. So I hope you enjoyed this. It's a little bit different episode for us. A couple interviews, but not from the creator side, but from the retailer and fan side, which to me was exciting and different.
It is, especially jumping off having an interview with Liam Sharp and stuff, and we get it from their perspective. And then, of course, a lot's changed since that interview. I mean, a lot has changed, and it's kind of nice to see it from the other end of the emotional spectrum, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. So I thank both Martin and David for coming on the show. It's great to have other voices.
Yeah, it really is. And both them, I mean, it's cool to talk to a guy like David. I mean, he's just such a passionate fan, and you can tell by just talking to him and just hearing his voice and stuff. And, he's really got some really, really cool ideas. And, And I can't tell you this enough, David. Start digging in deeper to some of that older stuff before Jeff Johns. You won't be disappointed. And if I can recommend, read the Spectre stuff with Hal Jordan. It's really, really, really good.
Yeah, it was a very interesting run. It was there were some things about it I thought were a little off, but I liked it overall.
Right.
All right. Well, my friends, I hope you are all staying safe and healthy wherever you are. We hope to be back next week with another episode. So until next time, keep that power ring charged. Please treat each other really, really well, especially right now, and make every day your brightest day.
And we'll talk to you guys soon.
The Podcast of OA is the official podcast of the blog of OA and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can send your emails to podcast@blogofoa.com. You can also find the Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA on Twitter and Facebook. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyrighted properties.